There are places on Earth so terrifying that even hardened criminals pray they never see them. Places where men disappear without a trace. Places where screams echo through concrete corridors long after the lights go out. Places where the walls have witnessed torture, starvation, executions, riots, massacres, and suffering on a scale most people can barely imagine. Behind these gates, freedom isn't the only thing prisoners lose. Some lose their sanity. Some lose their identities. Some lose every trace of hope. And some never leave at all. Around the world, governments built prisons to punish criminals. But in certain corners of the planet, those prisons evolved into something far darker. Some became kingdoms ruled by gangs. Others became factories of fear. And a few became so brutal that simply surviving another day became a victory. Tonight, we're counting down 10 of the most terrifying prisons ever built. From overcrowded hellholes and cartel-controlled death traps to secretive compounds where prisoners vanish into silence, each facility on this list has earned a reputation that stretches far beyond its walls. But one prison stands above them all. A place where human beings were packed together in such unimaginable conditions that their bodies literally began to fail. And when we reach number 1, you'll understand why many experts consider it one of the most horrifying correctional facilities ever documented. So lock the doors, turn down the lights, and prepare yourself, because these are the 10 most brutal prisons that shocked the world Part 2. And our countdown begins with a prison so feared in East Africa that even its name became synonymous with terror. Number 10. Kamiti Maximum Security Prison, Kenya. If prisons are designed to keep dangerous men locked away, then Kamiti Maximum Security Prison was built to do exactly that. For decades, its towering walls have stood over the northern outskirts of Nairobi like a fortress. A place feared by criminals, respected by security forces, and known throughout East Africa as one of the toughest prisons on the continent. But sometimes the most frightening prisons aren't remembered because nobody escapes. They're remembered because somebody did. And when it happened, an entire nation realized that the walls protecting them might not have been as strong as they believed. Long before international headlines found Kamiti, the prison had already built a fearsome reputation. Established during the colonial era, it became Kenya's most notorious maximum security facility. Murderers, armed robbers, terror suspects, gang leaders, and some of the country's most dangerous offenders all eventually found themselves behind its gates. From the outside, Kamiti looks intimidating enough. Layers of security, guard towers watching from above, high concrete walls stretching into the distance, steel gates separating inmates from the outside world. Everything about the prison was designed to send a simple message. Once you enter, getting out is no longer your decision. But inside those walls, life follows a much harsher reality. Thousands of inmates have passed through Kamiti's overcrowded cell blocks. Many describe conditions that are physically exhausting and psychologically draining. Cells often contain far more prisoners than they were originally designed to hold. Privacy becomes a luxury. Space becomes a privilege. And survival becomes something inmates think about every single day. For new arrivals, prison rules aren't always written by the authorities. They're often enforced by inmates themselves. Every prison develops its own hierarchy, its own culture, its own dangers, and Kamiti is no exception. Former prisoners have described an environment where strength commands respect and weakness can quickly attract unwanted attention. Arguments can escalate into violence. Debts can become dangerous. And every inmate must learn where they stand within the prison's social order. But despite its harsh reputation, Kamiti remained largely unknown outside East Africa. Until one morning in November 2021. That was when the impossible happened. 3 convicted terrorists vanished. Not from a remote jail. Not from a poorly guarded detention center. But from Kenya's most secure prison. The discovery sent shockwaves through the country. Security officials could hardly believe it. The men had been serving lengthy sentences for terrorism-related offenses. Yet somehow, they had escaped from a facility specifically designed to prevent exactly that. As news spread, panic followed. Police roadblocks appeared across the country. Security agencies launched a massive manhunt. Border officials were placed on high alert. Every hour that passed increased fears that the fugitives could disappear completely. Television stations interrupted programming. Newspapers ran the story across their front pages. Social media exploded with questions. How could 3 terror convicts escape from Kamiti? What had gone wrong? And perhaps most importantly, had somebody helped them? The answer would prove even more disturbing than the escape itself. Investigators eventually concluded that the prison break was not a spontaneous act. Evidence later presented in court showed the operation had been carefully planned and coordinated over time. Several prison officers were ultimately convicted for helping facilitate the escape, exposing serious weaknesses within one of Kenya's most secure institutions. The revelation transformed the story from a prison break into a national scandal. People expected dangerous inmates to attempt escape. They did not expect prison staff to help them. For ordinary Kenyans, confidence in the prison system was shaken. If convicted terrorists could walk out of Kamiti, what else could happen behind those walls? The fugitives were eventually recaptured after a nationwide search. But by then, Kamiti's reputation had changed forever. The prison was no longer known only for the dangerous men it contained. It became known for the escape that should never have happened. And perhaps that's what makes Kamiti so unsettling. Because unlike prisons where violence erupts openly or riots consume entire cell blocks, Kamiti revealed something far more frightening. Sometimes the greatest threat isn't the prisoners. Sometimes it's discovering that the people responsible for keeping them locked away can no longer be trusted. But as shocking as Kamiti's escape was, the next prison on our list became infamous for an entirely different reason. Because behind its walls, inmates didn't fear escape. They feared the conditions waiting for them every single day. And in some cases, those conditions proved deadlier than the crimes that brought them there. Number 9 takes us deep into Russia. To a prison where overcrowding, disease, and decades of suffering created one of the most feared detention centers in Europe. Number 9. Butyrka Prison, Russia. Some prisons become infamous because of what happens inside them. Butyrka became infamous because of what happened there for generations. Long before modern maximum security prisons existed. Long before surveillance cameras watched every corridor. Long before the world learned the names of prisons like BlackDolphin or ADX Florence, there was Butyrka. A prison so old, so feared, and so deeply woven into Russia's darkest chapters that its walls have witnessed revolutions, purges, torture, executions, political repression, and human suffering on a scale few prisons could ever match. Standing in the heart of Moscow, Butyrka doesn't look like a place frozen in terror. At first glance, it's simply an aging red brick fortress. But appearances can be deceptive. Because behind those walls lies a prison that survived empires. A prison that watched governments rise and fall. And a prison that became synonymous with fear itself. For more than 2 centuries, prisoners have entered Butyrka's gates not knowing when, or if, they would leave again. During the reign of the Russian Empire, political dissidents were locked inside its cells. During the Soviet era, thousands of prisoners passed through its corridors during some of the most brutal periods of state repression in modern history. Writers, activists, revolutionaries, ordinary citizens accused of disloyalty. Many found themselves swallowed by Butyrka's enormous walls. But history wasn't the only thing making the prison terrifying. The conditions themselves became legendary. Overcrowding became so severe that cells built for a handful of inmates sometimes held several times their intended capacity. The air grew thick and difficult to breathe. Disease spread easily. Sleep became a luxury. And privacy disappeared entirely. Former inmates described nights where prisoners slept in shifts because there simply wasn't enough room for everyone to lie down at once. Others recalled standing for hours in suffocating heat, surrounded by dozens of inmates packed into spaces never designed to hold so many people. Yet the physical discomfort was only part of the punishment. The real terror came from uncertainty. Every sound echoing through the corridor carried meaning. Footsteps. Keys rattling against metal. Doors opening somewhere in the darkness. For many prisoners throughout Butyrka's history, those sounds often signaled interrogations, transfers, or worse. During Stalin's Great Purge, the prison became a holding point for thousands of people accused of crimes against the state. Many waited inside overcrowded cells without knowing their fate. Some would eventually be sent to labor camps. Others would never return at all. Thousands were executed after investigations during that era. Imagine living in a place where every night someone is taken away. And every morning fewer people return. Imagine trying to sleep while wondering whether your name will be called next. For decades, that fear became part of daily life. But even as Russia changed, Butyrka's reputation remained. The Soviet Union collapsed. Governments came and went. Yet the prison continued attracting criticism for overcrowding, deteriorating infrastructure, and poor living conditions. Then came a discovery that reignited international attention. In 2019, prison monitors revealed that inmates had been housed inside one of Butyrka's abandoned towers. The conditions were shocking. A tiny cell, rotting walls, unsanitary surroundings, a steep and dangerous staircase, a space so neglected that observers questioned how prisoners could safely live there at all. The story spread quickly. For many Russians, it confirmed something they had long suspected. Despite its historical importance, Butyrka remained trapped in the past. Not as a museum, not as a monument, but as a functioning prison struggling under the weight of its own history. Yet perhaps the most frightening thing about Butyrka isn't a single riot, or a single massacre, or a single escape. It's the sheer number of lives that have passed through its gates. Generation after generation, decade after decade, regime after regime. The prison endured while countless prisoners disappeared into its shadows. Most prisons become notorious because of one horrifying event. Butyrka became notorious because horror was woven into its history. Its walls have heard the cries of revolutionaries, the confessions of political prisoners, the whispers of men awaiting judgment, and the silence left behind when those men were gone. Because some prisons are terrifying because of what happened there. Butyrka is terrifying because of how much happened there. And if a prison haunted by centuries of suffering sounds dark, the next prison on our list is darker still. Because unlike Butyrka, where prisoners feared what might happen to them, the men entering the next prison already knew. Heavy iron shackles, death row, executions, and a nickname so infamous that prisoners compared it to being hunted by a tiger. Our next stop takes us to Thailand. Number 8. Bang Kwang Central Prison, Thailand. The prisoner hadn't slept in 3 days. Not because he wasn't tired, but because every sound coming from the corridor felt like a death sentence. A footstep, a key turning inside a lock, the metallic scrape of chains against concrete. Each noise sent a surge of panic through his body. Because somewhere inside Bang Kwang prison, there was a tradition that terrified every man on death row. When guards appeared unexpectedly during the night, it usually meant only one thing. Someone's final morning had arrived. And tonight, that someone might be him. For hours he sat alone in darkness, listening, waiting, wondering if the next set of footsteps would stop outside his cell. Wondering if the next voice he heard would be the last. Around him, other prisoners remained awake as well. Not speaking, not moving, just listening. Because inside Bang Kwang Central Prison, fear doesn't sleep. It waits. And eventually it finds everyone. Just north of Bangkok stands one of the most feared prisons in Asia. A prison so notorious that inmates gave it a nickname that still sends chills through former prisoners decades later. The Big Tiger. Not because it was fierce, but because once it caught you, it never let go. For decades, Bang Kwang housed Thailand's most dangerous criminals. Mass murderers, drug kingpins, contract killers, foreign inmates abandoned thousands of miles from home, and men whose names were already written on execution orders. Many arrived believing they could survive prison. Few understood what survival would actually mean. Because Bang Kwang wasn't designed to break a prisoner's body overnight. It was designed to slowly dismantle his spirit. Day after day, month after month, year after year. The prison became infamous for its iron shackles. Massive restraints attached to prisoners' legs. Cold steel that followed them everywhere. Every movement, every meal, every attempt to sleep. The chains became a permanent reminder that freedom was no longer theirs. Former inmates described hearing thousands of pounds of metal dragging through the corridors every day. A sound many never forgot long after their release. But even the shackles weren't the prison's darkest feature. That distinction belonged to death row. A section of Bang Kwang where time itself became a form of torture. Prisoners lived in a constant state of uncertainty. No countdown. No clear date. No certainty. Just endless waiting. Waiting for guards. Waiting for news. Waiting for footsteps. Waiting for death. And then came one of the darkest incidents associated with the prison. For decades, executions were carried out by firing squad. Prisoners were strapped to a wooden cross-like structure before facing armed executioners. Many inmates could hear preparations taking place nearby. Some knew the men being executed. Some had spoken to them only hours before. Then one day they simply disappeared. The silence that followed often terrified prisoners more than the gunfire itself. Years later, Thailand transitioned to lethal injection. But the fear remained, because the destination had never changed. Only the method. Then in 2018, the world was reminded that Bang Kwang's execution chamber was still active. Thailand carried out its first execution in nearly 9 years. International media immediately focused on Bang Kwang once again. Human rights groups condemned the decision. News outlets across the globe debated the return of executions. And for prisoners sitting on death row, one reality became painfully clear. The big tiger was still hungry. Inside those walls, hope became a dangerous thing. The longer prisoners held on to it, the more painful it became when reality returned. Some men spent decades wondering whether they would ever walk free. Others spent decades wondering whether they would live long enough to find out. Because Bang Kwang didn't simply imprison people. It consumed them. Slowly. Patiently. Relentlessly. Yet as terrifying as the big tiger was, the prison waiting ahead is even darker. Because the men entering our next prison already know they'll never leave. No parole. No second chances. No possibility of freedom. Only concrete. Steel. And a lifetime surrounded by some of the most dangerous human beings on earth. Serial killers. Cannibals. Mass murderers. Terrorists. All locked together in a prison where guards say there is only one way out. In a coffin. Our next destination takes us deep into Russia. To a place many consider the most terrifying prison in Europe. Number 7. BlackDolphin. Russia. The guards found pieces of human flesh inside the apartment. At first, investigators thought it was an animal. They wanted to believe it was an animal. But as the evidence piled up, a far darker picture began to emerge. The man they had arrested wasn't just a murderer. He was a cannibal. And years later, he would find himself inside one of the most feared prisons on earth. A prison built specifically for men so dangerous that society no longer trusted them to ever walk free again. A prison where serial killers sleep a few doors away from terrorists. Where mass murderers eat breakfast beside cannibals. And where every inmate has one thing in common. They will die behind those walls. Welcome to BlackDolphin Prison. Deep in Russia's Orenburg region, near the border of Kazakhstan, stands a fortress unlike any other. Surrounded by layers of razor wire. Guarded by armed patrols. Monitored by cameras watching every angle. BlackDolphin houses some of the most dangerous criminals ever convicted in Russia. Collectively, its inmates are responsible for thousands of murders. Not hundreds. Thousands. Entire families have been wiped out by men locked inside these walls. Some prisoners murdered for profit. Others murdered for pleasure. And a few committed crimes so horrific that even experienced investigators struggled to speak about them publicly. This isn't a prison designed for rehabilitation. It's a warehouse for humanity's worst nightmares. The moment a prisoner arrives at BlackDolphin, his old life ends. Guards immediately place a blindfold over his eyes. His hands are restrained behind his back. Then comes the walk. A walk every inmate remembers. Bent forward at nearly 90 degrees. Arms restrained. Head lowered. Unable to see where they're going. Unable to know who is beside them. Unable to predict what comes next. Former officers described the procedure as a security measure. Former inmates described it differently. They called it the moment they stopped feeling human. Because from that point forward, every movement would be controlled. Every action monitored. Every second accounted for. 24 hours a day. 7 days a week. Even inside their cells, prisoners are watched constantly. Cameras record every movement. Guards conduct regular inspections. And inmates are forbidden from lying on their beds during daylight hours. For many prisoners, simply sitting alone with their thoughts becomes another form of punishment. And that's where BlackDolphin becomes truly terrifying. Because unlike many prisons on this list, violence isn't the greatest threat here. Isolation is. The prison forces inmates to spend decades trapped with the memories of what they did. No distractions. No freedom. No future. Just endless years staring at concrete walls while the weight of their crimes slowly closes in around them. Some prisoners have spent more than 20 years inside BlackDolphin. Others have spent even longer, knowing that every sunrise brings them one day closer to death, but never closer to release. And then there are the men themselves. One inmate murdered dozens of people. Another butchered entire families. Others committed acts so disturbing that Russian media rarely discusses them in detail. Yet among all the killers housed inside BlackDolphin, one story continues to haunt those who hear it. The story of Vladimir Nikolaev, known throughout Russia as the cannibal. After murdering a man during an argument, he dismembered the body. But he didn't stop there. Investigators later discovered that parts of the victim had been cooked and consumed. The case horrified the nation. Even seasoned detectives struggled to process what they were seeing. When he eventually arrived at BlackDolphin, he joined a population already filled with monsters, and somehow still managed to stand out. But perhaps the darkest chapter in BlackDolphin's history isn't a single crime. It's the realization that dozens of inmates inside the prison have committed atrocities just as horrifying. The prison has become a collection of nightmares. Each cell containing a story most people would rather never hear. Each corridor hiding crimes too disturbing for ordinary conversation. And yet, despite housing some of Russia's most dangerous offenders, BlackDolphin has earned another terrifying reputation. Its reputation for making men disappear from the world. Not physically, psychologically. The prison is designed so effectively that many inmates eventually lose track of life beyond the walls. Birthdays become meaningless. Years blur together. Memories fade. The outside world slowly becomes a distant dream. For some prisoners, death arrives long before their bodies stop breathing. It arrives when they finally accept that they will never leave. That no miracle is coming. That every remaining chapter of their lives will be written inside a concrete box. And that's when BlackDolphin becomes truly frightening. Not because of the killers it contains, but because of what it does to them. Because even monsters can be broken. Yet as dark as BlackDolphin may seem, the prison waiting ahead takes suffering to an entirely different level. The next facility doesn't rely on chains, or razor wire, or even dangerous inmates. Instead, it weaponizes something far more powerful. Silence. Imagine spending years alone. No conversations. No friendships. No meaningful human contact. Just endless isolation. Day after day. Month after month. Year after year. Until the line between reality and madness begins to disappear. Our next destination takes us to the United States. To a prison many former inmates describe as a place where the body survives, but the mind slowly dies. Welcome to ADX Florence. Number 6. ADX Florence, United States. There is a reason some prisoners fear ADX Florence more than death. Because death is an ending. ADX Florence is something else. It is a place where years disappear, where silence becomes a weapon, and where the human mind slowly begins to turn against itself. Please don't forget to like our channel, subscribe and turn on notification for more thrilling documentaries. Let's continue. Imagine waking up in a concrete box. Not for a day, not for a week, but for years. Imagine eating every meal alone, speaking to almost nobody, seeing almost nobody, touching another human being only when handcuffs are placed around your wrists. Now imagine knowing tomorrow will be exactly the same. And the day after that. And the year after that. For some prisoners, this isn't imagination. It's reality. And it happens inside the most secure prison in the United States. Hidden among the barren landscapes of Colorado sits a facility often called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. But that nickname doesn't come close to capturing what ADX Florence truly is. Because this prison wasn't built to contain ordinary criminals. It was built to contain men the government believed were too dangerous for any other prison on earth. Terrorists, cartel leaders, espionage agents, prison gang commanders, mass murderers, men whose names once dominated headlines around the world. If BlackDolphin houses Russia's worst criminals, ADX Florence houses America's most feared. The prison itself appears almost clinical. Cold concrete, steel doors, narrow windows designed to reveal little more than the sky. Every detail was carefully engineered, every measurement calculated, every corridor designed around one objective: control. Absolute control. The moment an inmate arrives, his world shrinks dramatically. His cell measures roughly the size of a parking space. A concrete bed. A steel sink. A steel toilet. Solid walls. A heavy door. And silence. So much silence that some former inmates described it as physically painful. Most prisoners spend approximately 23 hours each day alone. Not with cellmates. Not with friends. Alone. For years. Sometimes decades. The isolation becomes their entire world. And for many inmates, that's when the real punishment begins. Because human beings were never designed for complete isolation. Our minds require interaction. Conversation. Connection. Without it, something begins to change. Slowly at first. Then all at once. Former prisoners have reported hearing voices that weren't there. Others described talking to insects for companionship. Some held conversations with imaginary people simply to preserve their sanity. A few reached a point where they could no longer distinguish reality from hallucination. The walls remained standing. But the mind began to collapse. And then came one of the darkest stories ever associated with ADX Florence. A story that forced the world to ask a disturbing question. Can isolation itself become a form of torture? For years, lawsuits emerged from prisoners claiming that prolonged solitary confinement had caused severe psychological damage. Inmates reported hallucinations, paranoia, self-harm, mental breakdowns, and complete emotional deterioration. Psychologists studying extreme isolation warned that prolonged separation from human contact could fundamentally alter the human brain. The allegations sparked international debate. Human rights organizations condemned the conditions. Former inmates described watching neighboring prisoners descend into madness from behind steel doors. Some screamed for hours. Others talked endlessly to themselves. And some simply stopped speaking altogether. As if their minds had quietly shut down. American Civil Liberties Union reports and federal court filings widely documented long-term solitary confinement concerns. But perhaps the most chilling story involved a prisoner whose psychological condition deteriorated so severely that he began smearing his own cell with bodily waste while suffering from severe mental illness. The images and reports that emerged shocked many observers. Because for critics, the incident symbolized something terrifying. A prison designed so effectively to isolate dangerous people that it sometimes isolated them from reality itself. And unlike other prisons where violence erupts suddenly and visibly, the damage inside ADX often happens slowly, silently, one day at a time. A prisoner wakes up, eats alone, sits alone, sleeps alone, repeats the process, again, and again, and again, until years begin to feel like a single endless day. No riots, no gunfire, no dramatic escapes, just a gradual erosion of the human spirit. And that's what makes ADX Florence so disturbing. BlackDolphin attacks the body. ADX attacks the mind. One imprisons the criminal. The other imprisons consciousness itself. Because eventually the greatest threat inside ADX isn't another inmate. It's your own thoughts. Thoughts with nowhere to go. Thoughts trapped inside concrete. Thoughts that grow louder every year. And for some prisoners, those thoughts become impossible to escape. Yet as horrifying as ADX Florence may seem, the prison waiting ahead doesn't just isolate people. It erases them. No headlines. No public trials. No witnesses. No guarantees of survival. The next prison became so secretive and so feared that entire families sometimes spent years wondering whether their loved ones were still alive. Because once you entered its gates, the outside world often stopped hearing from you completely. And deep inside those walls, prisoners whispered stories of torture, executions, disappearances, and suffering that sounded less like a prison, and more like a nightmare. Our next destination takes us to Iran, to a prison whose name alone has terrified generations. The Evin prison. Please don't forget to like our channel, subscribe and turn on notification for more thrilling documentaries. Number 5. Evin Prison, Iran. The prisoner had been awake for so long that he no longer trusted his own mind. At first it was the silence. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing somewhere beyond the walls. Every night they came closer. Every night they stopped somewhere else. And every night someone disappeared. A journalist, a student, an activist, a professor, a father. One moment they were there. The next, their cell was empty. No explanation. No goodbye. No return. The remaining prisoners learned quickly not to ask questions. Because inside Evin prison, questions could be more dangerous than answers. Perched on the foothills overlooking Tehran stands one of the most feared prisons in the Middle East. A prison whose name has become synonymous with fear, interrogation, and uncertainty. A place where countless people entered expecting detention, only to find themselves trapped inside something far darker. For decades, Evin prison has housed political prisoners, journalists, academics, protesters, foreign nationals, and individuals accused of crimes against the state. Unlike many prisons on this list, Evin isn't feared because it houses the world's most violent criminals. It's feared because many prisoners never knew why they were there in the first place. And that uncertainty became its own form of torture. Imagine being taken from your home. Your phone disappears. Your family loses contact. Your lawyer cannot reach you. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Months become years. And every morning you wake up wondering if anyone outside knows you're still alive. Former detainees have described long periods of solitary confinement, interrogations lasting hours, psychological pressure, and the constant fear that the next knock on the door could change everything. But it wasn't the isolation that terrified many prisoners most. It was the waiting. The endless waiting. Waiting for news. Waiting for a trial. Waiting for release. Waiting for answers that never came. Please don't forget to like our channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more thrilling documentaries. Let's continue. And in a place where information was scarce, rumors became currency. Prisoners whispered stories through walls, passed messages through tiny cracks, shared warnings whenever they could, because information inside Evin often meant survival. Yet among all the stories emerging from the prison, one dark event would capture international attention and expose a world many had only heard about through whispers. In August 2021, a hacker group released surveillance footage allegedly taken from inside Evin prison. What the videos showed shocked people around the world. Guards dragging prisoners. Inmates being mistreated. Prisoners collapsing on the floor. Scenes that contradicted official narratives and instantly spread across international news outlets. For years, former detainees had described abuse behind closed doors. Now the world was seeing fragments of it with its own eyes. The footage went viral. Human rights organizations demanded investigations. Governments condemned what they saw. And suddenly, Evin prison became the focus of global attention. But as disturbing as the footage was, an even darker night was approaching. October 15, 2022. What began as reports of unrest inside the prison quickly escalated into chaos. Then came the fire. Flames erupted inside parts of the facility. Gunshots echoed through the night. Smoke rose above the prison walls. Families gathered outside in panic, desperate for information. Videos spread rapidly across social media. Nobody seemed to know exactly what was happening. Inside the prison, confusion and fear took over. Outside, relatives desperately searched for answers. By the time the fire was extinguished, multiple people were dead and many others injured. The images of burning prison buildings quickly traveled across the globe. For some observers, the fire became a symbol of everything Evin represented. A place hidden from view. A place surrounded by questions. A place where truth was often difficult to separate from fear. But perhaps the darkest thing about Evin isn't the footage, or the fire, or the stories told by former prisoners. It's the uncertainty. Because violence ends, fires burn out. Even physical pain eventually fades. But uncertainty can last forever. The uncertainty of not knowing why you're there. The uncertainty of not knowing when you'll leave. The uncertainty of not knowing whether the world has forgotten you. And for countless prisoners who passed through Evin's gates, that uncertainty became the heaviest burden of all. Because in some prisons, guards control your body. In Evin, fear controls your mind. Yet as disturbing as Evin may be, the next prison on our list takes horror to an entirely different level. The men entering our next facility aren't haunted by uncertainty. They're haunted by certainty. They know exactly where they are, exactly what surrounds them, and exactly how easily death can arrive. Because beyond the walls of the next prison, rival gangs don't simply fight for power. They wage war. Real war. With military-grade weapons. explosions, mass executions, bodies scattered across prison blocks, and scenes so gruesome that governments struggled to prevent the images from reaching the public. What happened there shocked the world and transformed a prison into one of the deadliest battlegrounds on Earth. Our next destination takes us to Ecuador, to a prison where the state lost control and the gangs took over. Number 4. Penitenciaría del Litoral, Ecuador. The first videos appeared online before authorities could stop them. Shaky footage, screaming, gunfire, smoke filling prison corridors, men running for their lives. Then came something even worse. Bodies, dozens of them, scattered across concrete floors stained dark with blood. Some prisoners had been shot, others had been hacked apart with machetes, and some had suffered fates so horrifying that news organizations around the world refused to show the full footage. For investigators arriving at the scene, it looked less like a prison, and more like the aftermath of a battlefield. But the most terrifying part? This wasn't a war zone. It was supposed to be a correctional facility, and it was only the beginning. On the outskirts of Guayaquil sits Penitenciaría del Litoral. At one time, it was simply Ecuador's largest prison. Today, it is remembered as one of the deadliest prisons in modern history. A place where criminal organizations grew so powerful that they eventually became stronger than the institution itself. Inside the prison walls, rival gangs didn't merely operate. They ruled. Entire sections of the facility became controlled by competing criminal factions. Each group maintained its own soldiers, its own leaders, its own territory, its own laws. The government still owned the prison on paper, but many believed the gangs owned it in reality. And when rival factions wanted control, negotiations rarely lasted long. Because inside literal prison, disputes weren't settled through conversations. They were settled through massacres. Weapons flooded the prison despite security measures. Handguns, rifles, explosives, machetes, knives. Items that should never have entered a correctional facility somehow became commonplace. The prison had effectively transformed into a city controlled by organized crime. And everyone trapped inside knew it. Former inmates described a constant state of fear. You weren't simply serving a sentence. You were surviving a war. Every day carried uncertainty. Every movement carried risk. Every night brought the possibility of violence. Because when gang conflicts erupted, nobody was truly safe. Not even prisoners with no involvement. And then came September 2021. A date forever burned into Ecuador's history. What began as a conflict between rival gangs quickly exploded into one of the deadliest prison massacres ever recorded anywhere in the world. Gunfire erupted across multiple prison blocks. Explosions echoed through the facility. Armed inmates stormed rival sections. What followed shocked even seasoned investigators. Prisoners hunted each other through corridors. Cells became killing grounds. Entire wings descended into chaos. When authorities finally regained control, the scale of the carnage became impossible to ignore. More than 100 inmates were dead. Hundreds more were injured. And the manner in which many victims died horrified the world. Some had been shot repeatedly. Others had been mutilated. Several were reportedly beheaded during the violence. The brutality was so extreme that international media outlets compared the prison to a war zone rather than a detention center. Images from the massacre spread across the globe. Governments reacted. Human rights organizations expressed alarm. And suddenly the world was asking the same question. How could this happen inside a prison? The answer was simple. Control had collapsed. The prison was no longer functioning as a prison. It had become a battleground. Yet astonishingly, the violence didn't end there. Months later, additional clashes erupted. More deaths followed. More bloodshed. More evidence that authorities were losing control of the situation. The prison seemed trapped in a cycle of violence that nobody could stop. And then investigators began uncovering something even darker. Many gang leaders were allegedly directing criminal operations beyond the prison walls. Murders, drug trafficking, extortion. Orders were reportedly flowing from inside the facility to accomplices on the outside. The prison wasn't containing organized crime. It had become one of its headquarters. Imagine being an inmate with no gang affiliation. Imagine knowing that powerful criminal organizations controlled entire sections of your world. Imagine understanding that a disagreement between rival factions could trigger another massacre before sunrise. That was daily life inside Penitenciaría del Litoral, a prison where survival often depended less on obeying the rules and more on avoiding the wrong people. But perhaps the darkest thing about Litoral isn't the number of people who died. It's how quickly human life lost its value. Over time, mass killings became almost expected. Headlines appeared. The death toll climbed. The world expressed shock. And then another massacre happened. And another. And another. As if violence itself had become routine. As if death had become part of the prison's architecture. Because eventually terror becomes normal. And that may be the most frightening thing of all. Yet as horrifying as gang wars, executions, and prison massacres may sound, the next prison on our list is darker still. Because the men entering it don't fear rival gangs. They fear the people running the prison. No criminal empire controls the next facility. No prison riot determines who lives or dies. Instead, prisoners disappear into a system accused of something far more chilling. Systematic torture, secret executions, and mass deaths hidden from the outside world. Imagine hearing your name called in the middle of the night. Imagine being led down a dark corridor. Imagine watching prisoners ahead of you vanish through a door and never return. That nightmare awaits us at number 3. A prison so feared that investigators once described it using 2 words that shocked the world. Human slaughterhouse. Our next destination takes us to Syria. Saydnaya prison. Please don't forget to like our channel, subscribe and turn on notifications for more thrilling documentaries. Number 3. Saydnaya prison, Syria. The prisoner could hear them coming. Not see them. Not identify them. Just hear them. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Growing louder with every second. Then silence. A cell door opened somewhere down the corridor. A voice shouted a name. Chains rattled. Then came the sound everyone feared most. The sound of someone being taken away. Hours later, the footsteps returned. But fewer of them. One man was missing. The next night it happened again. And again. And again. Eventually, prisoners stopped asking where people went. Because deep down they already knew. Some places are built to imprison people. Others are built to make them disappear. And according to survivors, Saydnaya prison became one of the most feared places on earth for exactly that reason. Located north of Damascus, Saydnaya was originally constructed as a military prison. From the outside it appeared almost ordinary. Concrete buildings, guard towers, perimeter fences. Nothing that immediately revealed the horrors many former detainees claim unfolded inside. But appearances can be deceptive. Because beyond those walls stood a prison that would eventually earn a reputation so terrifying that merely hearing its name sent fear through entire communities. For decades, Syrians whispered stories about Saydnaya. Stories of torture. Stories of disappearances. Stories of people entering the prison and never returning. At first, many believed the stories were exaggerated. Then survivors began speaking. And the picture that emerged was darker than most people imagined. Former detainees described an environment where fear governed every aspect of life. Prisoners allegedly learned to communicate through whispers. Some reportedly developed coded tapping systems through walls because speaking openly could bring punishment. Others claimed they spent so much time in darkness and isolation that they gradually lost their sense of time. Please don't forget to like our channel, subscribe and turn on notifications for more thrilling documentaries. Let's continue. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. And eventually many prisoners could no longer remember what freedom felt like. But it was the allegations of torture that would make Saydnaya infamous around the world. Former inmates described beatings so severe that some prisoners reportedly died from their injuries. Others spoke of being forced into painful stress positions for extended periods. Many accounts described a system built not merely to imprison people but to break them psychologically and physically. Yet even these accounts were only the beginning, because one of the darkest scenarios ever associated with Saydnaya emerged through years of investigations conducted by human rights organizations. Witnesses described prisoners being awakened in the middle of the night. Names would be called. Groups would be removed from their cells. The remaining inmates would hear footsteps fading into distant corridors. Then silence. The prisoners taken away rarely returned. According to extensive investigations and survivor testimony, thousands of detainees may have been subjected to secret executions over a period of years. The allegations drew international condemnation and turned Saydnaya into one of the most notorious prisons in the world. Amnesty International documented accounts that brought global attention to these claims. The findings shocked observers worldwide, not only because of the alleged scale, but because of the secrecy. Families searched desperately for answers. Parents waited years for news. Wives searched for husbands. Children grew into adults without knowing whether their fathers were alive. In many cases, uncertainty became its own form of torture. Then came another horrifying revelation. Survivors reported that silence itself became a survival strategy. Inside Saydnaya, making eye contact with guards could allegedly bring punishment. Speaking too loudly could bring punishment. Looking in the wrong direction could bring punishment. Many prisoners learned to move carefully, breathe carefully, exist carefully, as though life itself had become a crime. But perhaps the most chilling thing about Saydnaya wasn't the alleged torture, or the disappearances, or even the reported executions. It was how completely the prison seemed detached from the outside world. No witnesses, no cameras, no certainty, just walls, concrete, and fear. The kind of fear that survives long after prisoners leave. The kind of fear passed from one generation to another. The kind of fear that transforms a prison into a legend. Because eventually Saydnaya stopped being known as a building. It became known as a warning. A place whose reputation spread far beyond Syria's borders. A place where thousands entered darkness, and many never emerged. Yet even Saydnaya is not number one, as impossible as that may sound. Because the next prison on our list introduces a different kind of horror. Not torture. Not secret executions. Not disappearances. But something far more visible. A catastrophe hiding in plain sight. Imagine a prison built for a few thousand people. Now imagine cramming several times that number inside. Imagine sleeping surrounded by bodies. Imagine disease spreading faster than medicine. Imagine starvation becoming routine. Imagine human beings packed together so tightly that there is barely room to move. The next prison doesn't destroy people through secrecy. It destroys them through sheer human desperation. And what happened inside its walls shocked the world. Our next destination takes us to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. To a prison where overcrowding became a death sentence. Number 2. Makala Central Prison. Democratic Republic of the Congo. Most prisons on this list became infamous because of what prisoners did. Makala became infamous because of what happened to prisoners. And that's an important distinction. Because the horror of Makala wasn't created by gang wars. It wasn't created by serial killers. And it wasn't created by terrorists. It was created by a system collapsing on top of the people trapped inside it. A prison where overcrowding became deadly. A prison where disease spread faster than treatment. A prison where survival often depended on luck. And a prison where one catastrophic night exposed to the world just how dangerous those conditions had become. Located in Kinshasa, Makala Central Prison was originally built to hold only a fraction of the inmates eventually packed inside its walls. Yet year after year, the prison population continued growing. Authorities struggled to keep up. Resources became stretched. Living conditions deteriorated. And eventually Makala transformed into one of Africa's most overcrowded prisons. At times, reports suggested the facility held several times more prisoners than it was designed to accommodate. The consequences were devastating. Food shortages became common. Healthcare became overwhelmed. Sanitation deteriorated. Disease spread rapidly through overcrowded cell blocks. Former inmates described sleeping in extremely cramped conditions, competing for basic necessities, and living in an environment where illness could spread through entire sections of the prison. For thousands of prisoners, incarceration became something more than punishment. It became a daily struggle to stay alive. But what truly pushed Makala to number 2 on this list wasn't overcrowding alone. It was what happened when those conditions finally collided with chaos. September 2024. In the early hours of the morning, panic erupted inside Makala. What began as an attempted prison break quickly spiraled out of control. Prisoners surged through sections of the facility. Security forces responded. Confusion spread rapidly throughout the prison. And within hours, one of the deadliest prison disasters in modern African history was unfolding. When the violence finally ended, at least 129 people were reported dead. The scale of the tragedy shocked observers around the world and immediately drew international scrutiny. Reports also included allegations of abuses during the chaos, further intensifying concern about conditions inside the prison. But the death toll only tells part of the story. The deeper tragedy was that many observers believed the disaster had been years in the making. Makala had long been operating beyond its limits. Warnings about overcrowding and deteriorating conditions had circulated for years. Yet the prison continued absorbing more inmates, more pressure, more strain, until eventually the system reached a breaking point. And when it broke, dozens of lives were lost. That's why Makala ranks number 2. Not because of one massacre, not because of one notorious prisoner, but because it represents something far more terrifying. A prison can survive violent inmates. A prison can survive gang activity. A prison can survive riots. But when a prison can no longer sustain the human beings inside it, every person becomes vulnerable. The innocent, the guilty, the violent, the weak, everyone. Inside Makala, the greatest threat wasn't always another inmate. Sometimes it was the prison itself. A structure holding far more people than it was ever meant to contain. A system pushed beyond its limits. A disaster waiting to happen. And eventually it did. Yet despite all of this, despite the overcrowding, despite the deaths, despite one of the deadliest prison catastrophes in recent history, Makala is still not number 1. Because the prison waiting ahead achieved something few places in history ever have. It transformed human overcrowding into a form of suffering so extreme that international observers struggled to comprehend it. The next prison wasn't merely overcrowded. It was infamous for conditions so severe that inmates reportedly developed infections, permanent injuries, and life-altering medical complications simply from existing inside its walls. No gang wars. No sophisticated torture system. No cartel armies. Just human beings packed together so tightly that the limits of the human body itself were tested. And what investigators discovered there would shock the world. Our number 1 prison. Please don't forget to like our channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more thrilling documentaries. Number 1. CECOT El Salvador. The first thing they do is shave your head. Not because it's prison procedure. Because individuality is no longer important. The second thing they do is strip away your name. Inside CECOT, you are not a father, not a brother, not a husband, not even a person with a future. You are an inmate. And according to the philosophy behind the prison, you are there to disappear from society forever. No release dates. No rehabilitation programs. No visits. No contact with the outside world. No second chances. Only concrete, steel, and time. Endless time. Because once the gates of CECOT close behind you, the world is supposed to forget you ever existed. Welcome to the Terrorism Confinement Center. The prison many people call the most feared prison on earth. Located in Tecoluca, El Salvador, CECOT was opened in 2023 as the centerpiece of President Nayib Bukele's war against gangs. Built at extraordinary speed and protected by layers of walls, electrified fencing, armed guards, surveillance systems, and watchtowers, the facility was designed to hold up to 40,000 inmates, making it one of the largest high-security prisons ever constructed in the Americas. But size isn't what made CECOT famous. Fear did. The prison was built for men authorities considered the most dangerous gang members in the country. Members of MS-13. Members of Barrio 18. Gang leaders. Hitmen. Extortionists. Men accused of turning entire neighborhoods into war zones. And from the moment the first prisoners arrived, the images shocked the world. Rows upon rows of tattooed inmates. Heads shaved. Hands shackled. Bodies packed tightly together under the watch of heavily armed guards. The footage spread across social media. News channels replayed it repeatedly. For supporters, it represented order finally defeating chaos. For critics, it looked like something far darker. And that debate continues today. But step inside the prison itself and the atmosphere becomes even more unsettling. Cells hold dozens of inmates at a time. Metal bunks rise in stacked rows. Bright lights remain on constantly. Prisoners reportedly spend around 23 to 23.5 hours each day confined to their housing areas with extremely limited movement. There are no family visits, no phone calls, no access to the outside world, no television, no internet, no meaningful connection to life beyond the walls. The message is simple. The prison isn't trying to prepare inmates for society. It's trying to remove them from it completely. And that brings us to one of the darkest scenarios ever associated with CECOT. Not a riot, not an escape, because there haven't been any successful prison breaks. Instead, the darkness comes from something more disturbing. The idea that thousands of people may enter a place from which almost nobody is expected to return. One of the most chilling statements associated with CECOT came during public discussions surrounding the prison's purpose. Officials repeatedly emphasized that many of the inmates housed there would never return to their communities. That message became part of the prison's identity and helped fuel its global reputation. Then international scrutiny intensified. Human rights organizations, journalists, and investigators began raising concerns about transparency, due process, prison conditions, and allegations of mistreatment. Reports described inmates living under constant surveillance. Others alleged harsh treatment and severe restrictions on communication with the outside world. The prison's secrecy only deepened public fascination. And then came the images. Thousands of prisoners lined up in formation. Thousands more moved through prison blocks under heavy guard. The scale was unlike anything most people had ever seen. Not because prisons had never been violent, but because CECOT looked industrial. A machine designed for one purpose: mass confinement. A place where tens of thousands could vanish behind walls and razor wire. A place so large and so heavily secured that it almost felt detached from the rest of the world. That is why CECOT ranks number one. Not because it has the highest murder rate. Not because it experienced the deadliest riot. Not because of a single infamous massacre. But because it represents something new. A modern mega-prison built on a scale rarely seen before. A prison designed to contain entire criminal networks. A prison where isolation from society is not a side effect. It's the objective. And perhaps that's what makes it so frightening. Many prisons on this list became notorious after tragedy struck. CECOT was designed from the beginning to be feared. Every wall, every tower, every cell, every rule, everything serves the same purpose: to convince the men inside that freedom is over. Forever. Because in most prisons, inmates count the days until release. Inside CECOT, many believe there is nothing left to count. And that is why, for millions around the world, it has become the most terrifying prison of the modern era. And now the question passes to you. After seeing the brutality of Kamiti, the haunting history of Butyrka, the chains of Kwang, the killers of BlackDolphin, the isolation of ADX Florence, the fears surrounding Evin, the bloodshed of Penitenciaría del Litoral, the horrors associated with Saydnaya, the deadly conditions inside Makala, and the massive fortress of CECOT, which prison do you believe deserves the #1 spot? Did we get the rankings right? Or is there another prison so terrifying that it should have made this list? Let us know your ranking in the comments below. And if this documentary changed the way you see prisons around the world, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the world's darkest places. Because sometimes the most frightening stories aren't found in horror movies, they're hidden behind real walls and real bars. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.